I get rolling this morning, I did want to share with you something that's coming up this Thursday at 7 o'clock here in our building. It's something that we call Copper Hills 101. And so a lot of us have heard about that before, but if you're new around here, or if you've been around for a period of time and have never taken the time to come experience that evening, I'd just love to make a personal invite to you to come join us. This is the best opportunity that you have to learn more about our church, to learn more about the history of what God's done in our church. It's so awesome to look back at his faithfulness of what he did to bring Brad and Elfie here, and the stories of what took place along the way for us to become what we are today. This doesn't just happen by accident, right? It takes a long work of God to make this happen. And it's so great to look back on what he's done. But the main thing for me, what I love the most, is to look forward to what God's gonna do, what we hope God will do in and through us as a church. And Copper Hills 101 is the best place for you to learn that, for you to learn more about whether or not this is the church that God might be calling you to. And really, you'll have the opportunity at the end, should you choose to say, you know what, this is my church. I do feel God leading me to make the commitment to say, this is the church that I'm gonna live on mission with, to see what God does in and through me and this church. And that happens at Copper Hills 101. So again, I'd love to see you there this Thursday at 7 o'clock. You can register online, but if you forget, we'll still take you in. We're nice like that. You can come. So I would love to see you there. Hey, can I tell you about the most expensive mistake I've made as a parent? If you have multiple children, you're gonna pick up on this one real quick and laugh at me. If you don't have children old enough to make this mistake yet, I hope to save you. That's my goal today. So I have 4 children. I have 4 kids. And when my oldest turned 16, I bought him a car. I know, right? There's differing views. It's like, we shouldn't do that, make them earn it. And I'm like, no, I want him to drive, like, get out of my house. So anyway, bought him a car, which is fine, right? That's just a few $1,000s. You can do that once. And then the next one turned 16, and I'm like, well, I guess I gotta buy him a car. And then the third one turned 16, and you move to Arizona where cars are really expensive, and then you gotta buy him a car. And so right now I'm kind of in this dilemma, right? I'm trying to figure out, when Cadence turns 16, is it more expensive to buy her a car or pay for counseling? I'm weighing those things out, right? It's tough to say. I tell you that story because when Corbin, my second son, when he turned 16, it was 2020. I don't know if you remember what took place in the used car market in 2020. Not the best time to be buying a vehicle, but we wanted to get him a car because we already set that in motion. And so it was time to get him a car. And Corbin, to be fair, he's one of those kids, right? If you've got multiples, you know. He does everything you want him to do. He does the hard work. He works hard in athletics. He just is a great kid, serves at the church. You want to buy him a nice car. At least we did. And so we're looking the best we can. We've got our budget, and there's just not a lot of options out there until we run across this car. This is an older model Nissan Altima, but it's a coupe, right? It's got black rims on it. It's got kind of a blacked out grille. It's got the tinted windows and the moon roof. It also has a lot of miles, which is why we could afford it, but that didn't matter. I just wanted it to look cool for him, right? And so he walks out the door on his 16th birthday, and I've got it on video. I watch it every year on his birthday, and he's just super excited, so grateful to have this awesome looking car, which actually, to be fair, it did serve him for quite a long time. So until about a month after this picture, and we began to realize those black rims that we thought were so awesome, well, they were painted. And so it started to crack and peel off. And then they had some sort of genie trick they did on the paint. But the paint that looked so shiny and new right there, within about a month of the elements of the Midwest, it exposed the nasty, sun-tarnished paint that was actually underneath the whole time. And so within a month, it went from looking like this to looking like, a 16-year-old car, just kind of beat up and gross. And what they seemed to do, which I don't know how they did it, the people selling us this car, they kind of schemed a little bit, and somehow they just slapped the new right on top of the old. And they did it well enough that I was kind of fooled by it. And so why do I tell you this? It's because we're in the middle of this series called Parables, and the parable we're going to look at, it's actually 2 parables kind of squeezed into one. Jesus is talking about this very idea of taking the old and just kind of slapping the new on top of it, and what that means for us and how terrible that can be for us. And Corbin's car story really kind of it kind of got me thinking about a lot of us, how we've experienced some things in our lives, how we started off so shiny and new, right? Like we started off looking so pretty, and it just didn't seem to last very long. And maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're exhausted from it, ready to move on, ready to be done. Maybe you came in this morning as kind of like a last-ditch effort with very little hope that it was actually going to do anything, because at one point in your life, you were doing just fine. Like, your life wasn't terrible. You weren't hurting anybody. It wasn't that big a deal. Your mistakes weren't that big of a deal, but then something flipped, or there was a pivotal circumstance in your life, and a good-meaning friend, somebody who loved you and cared for you, said, hey, you should try spirituality. That'll make it all better. And so you just thought, okay, I'll sprinkle a little Jesus on top. I'll throw a dash of church in there, right? I'll just mix it all together, and everything will be better. And you started off so shiny, right? You did all the things. You attended regularly, even more than twice a month, maybe. And you gave $1 or $2 here and there. You even learned to sing the songs and did this weird things with your hands, like you were doing all the stuff. And it just faded so fast. It just didn't really work out for you. Like, you started to realize the brokenness it's all still there. The cracks, they started to show again. And let me just tell you this, just out of like love for you, really concern for you. Your friend who told you that, as much as they were well-meaning, as much as they really did, I think they love you and care about you, man, they unintentionally sold you a lie. Because that was never what this was supposed to be about. Jesus never came to be the seasoning on your life. He never came to be an addition to what you were already doing. He never came to be a patch on the old you and to make the old you better. He came to bring a brand new thing. He came to make a brand new you. Jesus didn't come to patch up the old you. He didn't come to be another to-do on the list of religious to-dos that you're trying to figure out. He came to bring something new. That's what we're going to be looking at in today's parable. And today, we're going to be doing a lot of Bible, which I hope that you expected at least some Bible coming here today, but we're going to be doing a lot of it. We're going to be in Luke 5, verses 33 through 39. So if you have your copy of the scriptures, if you want to pull it up on your app, you can do that. But before we jump into verse 33, I do want to give us a little bit of context of where we're at in the context of this story, like where all this is taking place. So we're going to jump back to verse 27, and this is where we begin reading. After this, which if you want to know what after this means, you need to go back and read the first stuff, but you can do that later. After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth, and he said, "Follow me." And Levi got up and left everything and followed him. And so you may not recognize the name Levi. It depends on how long you've been around the church circles. But Levi actually was Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples. Maybe you've heard the name Matthew. And it's really kind of akin to something else you may have heard, maybe not, the name Simon Peter. So Simon was his original name, and when he chose to follow Jesus, when Jesus made the call for him to follow him, and he gave away everything and walked away from his life to follow Jesus, Jesus gave him something new. He gave him something new and a new name, and it's the same way here. We know this because this is the only time we see the name Levi occur. It only occurs in the account of Jesus calling Levi to follow him, and from this point forward, we know Levi as Matthew, just so you know who we're talking about today. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with him. We know from past scriptures that we've read that tax collectors is often associated with other sinners. So the others in this would be tax collectors, and other sinners were eating with them. And so Matthew has money. As a tax collector in his city, he's got money. Like, I got to play golf at the Biltmore Country Club yesterday, and that's money I don't understand. Like we went to a par 3 hole, and we're kind of stuck for a little bit, so we're talking about the house that's right there. It's this beautiful modern house built in the midst of an old neighborhood with a bunch of older, very nice homes. And I'm like, how does that even happen? And the guy playing with us told us, he said, that family, they bought the old house for $2.1 million and knocked it down to build this one. I don't get that money. I don't understand how that works. That's Matthew money, right? And so Matthew's got money that the rest of the people around him don't have or don't understand. And so he throws a party. He throws a party that the kind of people with money like that throw. But the religious leaders, the Pharisees, they can never leave well enough alone. And so they're always bothering Jesus. And so this is what we see. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belong to their sect, that area, complained to his disciples, to Jesus' disciples, the ones that he's already called at this point. why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? And so they just throwing it out there, right? They're like, hey, based on our old way of doing things, based on the law that we follow, the things that we try and teach our people, that we've given our lives to, based on this old way of doing things, that doesn't fit. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't fly with our way of doing things. And Jesus answers them. Pretty simple answer. It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, which is what they would have expected. That would have made sense to them. But I've come to do something completely new, to call sinners to repentance. And then Jesus gets asked another question, which at this point has to be annoying, just wants to enjoy the party, right? That's all he wants to do at this point. And in verse 33, we see they said to him, we'll talk about the they in just a second. They said to him, John's disciples often fast and pray, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees, but yours go on eating and drinking. And so who are the they, right? The inference right here that we might assume is because he mentioned the Pharisees before, that the they would be the Pharisees. But Matthew, remember Levi became Matthew, and then later he writes his own account of Jesus' life. We know it as the book of Matthew, the first book of our New Testament. Matthew, in his telling of this same story, he gives us some clarity about the they. And he tells us that it was the disciples of John. The disciples of John the Baptist are the they in this sentence that we just read. These disciples of John the Baptist, John who baptized Jesus, John who was the first to proclaim Jesus as the Messiah when he says, behold, the King of the Jews come to take away the sins of the world. He was the first one to proclaim him as Messiah. So John's disciples obviously know who Jesus is. John the Baptist would not go through life with disciples without helping them understand who they are and what their purpose is, because John's purpose was to make a way, was to prepare the way for Jesus. And so they know who he is. And they're thinking, hey, in case you have forgotten, we live in the desert with our boss. Our boss who wears camel hair and eats bugs. So yeah, we fast every now and then. But we do that. John the Baptist disciples, they do that for Jesus. Everything they've sacrificed has been to prepare the way for him. Every time they fasted and prayed, it's to prepare the way for him. And they look at Jesus, and Jesus is partying. And so, yeah, they've got a legit point. They have a valid question to ask. They're like, hey, we do this. We fast and we pray for you. Why don't you do it? And so Jesus answers them this way. With compassion, I think he says, can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? I mean, Jesus is saying, come on, man. Look at this place. Matthew's got a killer DJ. Did you see those fire dancers? He's got the best wine, and the charcuterie board has cheeses I can't pronounce. We're going to party. Oh, and by the way, I'm right here. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and in those days, they'll fast just like you do. So Jesus uses a term here that's important for us to kind of wrap our minds around. He refers to himself as the bridegroom, which to you and I is either confusing or means nothing, but to them would have been flooring. It would have blown them away because they understood the term bridegroom to mean God the Father and the covenant that he made with his people Israel. And so when God made a covenant with his people, he referred to himself as the bridegroom coming for his bride, the people of Israel. And so Jesus is saying, hey, I'm the new bridegroom. And so if I'm the new bridegroom, something new is coming along with me. And then finally, the parable that you've all been waiting for. Verse 36, here we go. So he tells them this parable. No one tears a piece out of a new garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, wants the new, for they say the old is better. Let's jump back and break this down just a little bit. No one tears a piece out of a new garment to patch to an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. This is more, Jesus is not concerned with mismatched clothing. Like it's not his concern here. And Matthew, who I mentioned before, and Mark, in their accounts, their biographies of Jesus' life, they tell this same story, and they add something to this one sentence that I think helps us. They say, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, because when you wash it, the new patch will shrink, ruining both the patch and the garment, tearing the older garment, ruining both the old and the new. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out and the wineskins will be ruined. Mark, again, in this same section, he adds just a little piece that I like a little bit. It says, the skins will burst, ruining both the wineskin and the wine, ruining the old and the new. And so what is he really talking about? Because he's obviously not concerned about giving sewing lessons or about wine storage. That's not his concern. He wants them to see, and ultimately us to see, the damage that occurs when we try and hold on to the old while embracing the new. You ruin both. You ruin both the old and the new. And so what is the old and the new that he's referring to? Well, the old is the old covenant. The old covenant, what we see in the Old Testament, kind of the first half of our Bible. It took place about 1,500 years before the time of Jesus. After God had rescued his people, Israel, out of Egypt, the people who eventually became known as the Jewish people, who we read so much about in the New Testament. After he rescued the Israelites out of Egypt, he made a covenant with them. He made a promise with them. He said, I will be your God, and you will be my people. But there's some terms to this relationship, and we see some of those terms in Deuteronomy. Moses is speaking to the Israelites, helping them understand some of these terms, and he says, if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully keep all his commandments that I am giving you today, the Lord your God will set you high above the nations of the world. You will experience all these blessings if you obey the Lord your God. That's the big condition. If Israel, if God's people, the one he's made a covenant with, if they obey all the laws, then he's promised protection and blessing and favor on them. The old covenant, it shaped moral, civil, and ceremonial life for them. It came with laws that helped them understand how to love God and how to love people. It came with an entire sacrificial system for them and priests for them that helped them know what to do when you mess up. The law, the covenant, it came with a place, a physical location on earth where they could meet with God, a tabernacle or a temple. And so what was the purpose? Why did God give this to them in the first place? Well, we see three big purposes. The first one is, it is a mirror to them to reveal their sin. It is a mirror to show them where they've marginalized God and pushed him to the side, where they've put other idols on the thrones of their hearts, how they've allowed those things, when they push God to the side, how they've allowed that to impact and affect their actions. It shows them their sin, and it's a hedge of protection, if you will, to keep Israel distinct from other nations, to set them apart from the nations around them so they wouldn't just fall into the same systems and structures as the nations around them. And ultimately, my favorite is it's a signpost. The entirety of the covenant, the law, the Old Testament, the whole thing from the start of the book to the end is about Jesus. It's all meant to point their eyes towards Christ, their Messiah. And Paul explains it this way in a letter that he wrote to the church in Galatia. He says, why then was the law given? It was given alongside the promise to show people their sin, to be a mirror to them. But the law was designed to last only until the coming of the child who had been promised. It was never meant to last forever. So what's the result of this old covenant? The law is good. It was good for God's people, but it exposed a pretty big problem. Nobody keeps it. Nobody keeps it, and really, that was kind of the point. God's point to them was to show them, hey, you can't make yourself acceptable to God by keeping the rules. And Jesus is trying to help them see that the old system cannot simply be added to. If you try to add to the old system, you ruin both the old and the new. You do not experience the goodness of either of them. It must be completely replaced by the new. Which then begs to ask, what's the new? Well, we'll get to the new in just a second, but first I do want to tell you about another story, another conversation Jesus was having with some religious leaders again, as he always seemed to be doing. And Matthew tells us this account in Matthew 22. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees and the Pharisees, he'd kind of stumped them. They all got together, and one of them, an expert in the law, a lawyer, it's the best they could get, I guess, tested him with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? They knew the answer. Let's test him with this question. What's the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied this way. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. They would have known that. Then he kind of throws in this little caveat, right? It's just kind of 1A, 1B, same level, kind of equalizing these two. And he says, love your neighbor as yourself. That would have been kind of new for them. That would kind of question them. They'd question a little bit what that was all about. And then this line that we just kind of skip over, maybe read and pay no attention to, I have to assume they either paid no attention to it, or if they heard it, it would have blown them away. Because Jesus says all the law and the prophets, everything you've been trying to do, everything that you've been trying to do and the way that you've been trying to live your life and the way that you've been trying to get other people to live their lives and forcing it upon them and putting this heavy weight upon them, all of it can be summed up in or hangs on these two commandments. Jesus essentially saying, hey, guys, dummies, if you would have just done these two, if you would have just done these two with all that you have, all the rest would have been taken care of. But I don't know if they picked up on it. They probably would have said, hey, that's not new. I mean, we know that's not new. And so how do you and I today, as New Covenant, New Testament followers of Jesus, what does it look like for us to live this new covenant in our day-to-day lives? I mean, how many commands must there be, right? I mean, the old covenant had 613 plus. The old covenant was far more than the 10 that we know about or that we pay attention to. I mean, they were trying to follow way more than they could. So if the Old Testament had 613, like, what is this new covenant? Man, there must be so many. I can't imagine how many there are. But Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, as he sharing dinner with his friends before he goes to the cross and ultimately resurrection, he shares this with them. John records it. He says, a new command I give you. Something completely new. And they would have looked at him and said, hey, Jesus, be careful on this one. I mean, you've said a lot of things, but nobody gives new commands but God. And he'd say, you're right. A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, they will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. And so we have all the laws for the old covenant. I didn't count if there's 613 in there, but let's just pretend there are. 613 plus laws in the old covenant. And Jesus looks at it and he looks at the Jewish people at the time who were trying their best to do this, trying their best to figure out how they can live this life, and they constantly fail. And Jesus says, one new command I give you. Love each other. Not love each other the way that you would like to be loved. That's so Old Testament golden rule. This is far more difficult. Love each other the way that I have loved you. That's the new command. And it's far heavier. It's far weightier. It's far more difficult. Because when there's only one, there's no loopholes. You can't try and figure out a way around it. You always know what love requires of you when you look at Jesus. You always know. And his point to them, and his point to us is that we elevate this above all of that, and that we filter all of that through this. This is how we know if we're living out the new covenant command that he's called us to. And so often what we do is we come to faith new and we're trying to figure this whole thing out is we say, man, these are awesome. I like knowing all the things I'm supposed to do. I can check these off, and so I'll just add that one in there and I'll make it all work. But Jesus didn't throw a new lifesaver into the old container. He replaced the whole thing. He simplified it for us, not by lowering the bar. He didn't make it easier for us, but by raising it for us, because loving as he loved is far more demanding than trying to follow a list of rules. There's no loopholes, there's no, but what about when? You always know what love requires of you when you look at Jesus. He becomes the filter. He becomes the interpreter through which you look at everything. And he's the example of what love looks like for us. The old jar was about commandments. The new one, this new command is about becoming more like Jesus. Dallas Willard, who was a pastor, author, philosopher that we quote a lot around here. He actually had a lot to say about what it looked like to live in the kingdom of God, to live out this new covenant command and experience God's kingdom here and now today, not just someday when we die. And I kind of summed up all of his thoughts this way. This is how I summed it up. The new covenant writes God's law on the hearts of those who have surrendered their lives to King Jesus, so that the natural expression of the follower of Jesus becomes the actions of Jesus. Through the power of Jesus, for the glory of Jesus. This is inside-out formation into the likeness of Jesus, and this is how we experience the fullness of his kingdom today. We're not trying to earn anything. We're not trying to figure out a list of rules. God writes this law on our hearts when we surrender to King Jesus, and ultimately, because of that, we have nothing left to do, but we're compelled to live our lives for him. Our actions become like his, and we're only able to do that because of the power of his Spirit within us, and ultimately, they are to give him glory. This is how we live out new covenant faith. This is how we live out the new covenant command that Jesus has placed before us. If religion for you, if following a prescribed set of rules in hopes of appeasing an angry God, if that has worn you out, if it has torn you down, it's because it was never going to give you what your heart desired. It wasn't built for that. Some of us have been trying to patch the old for a long time, trying harder, bigger promises. I'll do better next time, all in hopes that it sticks and we don't have to fight through it again, just so that we might become better, that we might be able to strive and work to become more of what he wants us to be, that we can work to be a better Christian. That's old covenant way of living. Following the commands, making the sacrifices, putting in the effort, following the rules, all without ever experiencing any change in the heart. But Jesus never came to patch the old. He came to pour out new. The new covenant is God's promise fulfilled in Jesus. On the cross, he made a once-for-all offering for sin, sealing that covenant with his blood for us. He didn't offer you new or better rules. He offered you fullness of life and forgiveness. He doesn't hand you a stone tablet with commandments on it. He writes his will and his desire and his law on your heart, so that by the power of the Spirit, you can have actions that look like his. So obedience to him, after all this, obedience to him no longer is a begrudging act that we feel like we have to do. It starts becoming the natural expression of who we are because of a Spirit-filled, Spirit-alive heart within us. You know what it looks like to mix the old and the new today for us? It's when we try to live under grace while trying to earn grace. It's when following Jesus becomes more about keeping the rules than walking in relationship with him. The old covenant says, I obey God so that he'll love me. The new covenant says, God loves me. He loves me. Like, what else do I have to do but obey him? Too often we drift back into this thought process that we have to do more. We have to work harder. We have to try and earn approval that's already been given, grace that's already been given. And we use guilt and shame to motivate us to be better. We use the shame of the actions that we've done to cause us to feel bad. And maybe if we feel bad enough, then maybe we can actually bring about change. And when we do that, it's sewing a new patch onto an old garment. It's pouring new wine into old wineskins, and it just doesn't fit, and we ruin both. We don't experience anything from the law, not that there was anything for us to experience anyway, but we're also not experiencing the fullness of what Jesus has for us. We ruin both when we try and put a patch on the old. The grace that Jesus offers doesn't work inside an old system. It doesn't work inside an old system of trying to prove yourself over and over again. The new covenant that Jesus has called to live in brings only new. Would you take a moment and close your eyes with me as we prepare to pray? I didn't want to say, if you've surrendered your life to Jesus, if that's taken place for you, but you constantly find yourself falling back into this old way of thinking, of scratching and clawing and striving to be better, to perform better, in hopes that you might earn the grace that you've already received, the mercy that he's already bestowed upon you, the love that he has so fully for you. The invitation for you this morning, for you, is to walk away from that, to discard that. It has become obsolete for you. God has written a new law in your heart. Let that new law be what forces a natural expression for you to live out a life that is honoring to King Jesus. Let your actions be a natural expression of the overflow of what's already taken place in your heart through the power of the Holy Spirit, so that your life becomes glorifying to the King. If you've never done that, if you've never trusted in Jesus, here's the invitation for you. And this is awesome for you. Surrender to King Jesus as your forgiver. Choose to follow him for the rest of your life as your leader. You are in a great place this morning. You are new wineskin. You are set, ready, and prepared for God to pour new life into you this morning. Would you allow him to pour that new life into you? Jesus, I thank you so much for what you've done for us in fulfilling the old covenant. I believe outside of being a first century ethnic Jew, I don't know that we can fully understand the magnitude of what that means. But would you give us the grace to maybe get closer to that today? That we would have some sense of how big this is. That you have fulfilled all of that. And we get to filter all of that through your new covenant command to love you and to love others, and to constantly ask the question, what does love require of me? What does love require of me in this situation, in this relationship, in these things that are going on for me? What is it that you want from me? And we begin to live out those actions to your glory. Jesus, we do this because you love us. Because you love us, we want to live our lives for you and experience the fullness of your kingdom today. We're a group of people saying we want to experience the fullness of you today, not someday when we get to heaven. We believe in faith that we can experience all that you have for us. So would you continue to pour yourself out on us as a community? Jesus, we love you. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.